Welcome to the Spiritual Lit meeting. Each week, we're honored to host powerful speakers from around the world, sharing their stories, experiences, and hope with us. All of our speakers are recorded and shared through our Spiritual Lit YouTube channel, so the message can reach those who need it. If you're listening to this recording and you're struggling, seeking help, or simply have a question, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can contact us anytime at spirituallit24@gmail.com, and we promise to get back to you. And tonight, we've invited Celtic Frank and Sinead P to share for the next 50 minutes on the topic emotional sobriety. We will give you a sign 10 minutes before your time's up. Thanks so much for making the time to share your experience with us. And with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sinead. I'm an addict. Yeah, it's lovely to be here and it's lovely to be asked, and to be sharing it with Frank. He's a very special person in my life and my recovery. So it's very wholesome. It's a very wholesome moment for me, to be honest. And I was just listening there. What you were saying is to use is to die, and we take this stuff serious. And I was thinking about that just before the meeting started, because where I'm from here in Cork, there's a young boy passed away yesterday, 22, from this illness. He was a member in our group and some groups locally, and that's what we're dealing with here. I know we can come on and we can have the crack and we can talk about topics and we can, share about all this stuff, and which is great, and that's how we grow and we learn. But it's the seriousness of it, and that's what's at hand here. Do you know what I mean? It's life or death, unfortunately. Um, and I suppose that's the way it was for me as well. When I came in here, it was either do this with everything I had or take my own life. There was probably a bit of drinking and drugging left in me, like physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, everything else, I was wiped. And I suppose my experience, I know the topic is on emotional sobriety, and I have to be honest, disclaimer, am I emotionally sober all the time? Probably not, but I try my best. I just came from an acupuncture session. I was booked in at 4:30, and I spent an hour there, and I have to do all these things continuously, along with my big book, my steps, my sponsoring, all this stuff, because my emotions from as long as I remember have just always been out of whack. Do you know what I mean? I didn't know what emotions were. I only knew one emotion, and it was anger. And I learned in here that anger is a good a good mask for fear. Do you know what I mean? And that's the way I was going around my whole life. I was just a very traumatized, very fearful woman, child, I suppose. And when I came into the rooms, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I just thought I was a bad person. I just thought I was angry. I thought I was aggressive. But I didn't actually know that what I was an addict and an alcoholic, and that I was traumatized, and I just needed a bit of nurturing and a bit of love, and I got that when I came into these rooms. And I was actually lucky enough that when I got sober, I actually got sober through Alcoholics Anonymous, because CA wasn't very big here at the time. And a lot of us went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got sober through really, really old timers, like 40, 50 plus years of sobriety. And one of their meetings a week was an emotion sobriety meeting. And it was on Zoom every Monday. So very early on, I started to hear about Bill's letter, on emotion sobriety. And um, it started to kind of open something within me, being like, right, there's more to this than just staying off drinking drugs. Um, so the seed was planted quite early for me, and I knew um I was going to look into this more and stuff, but I suppose for me, I had to get into the program, the big book, very early on. I think I was only about 2 weeks sober. I remember my sponsor at the time said to me, I'd heard all these things that, you had to do 90 meetings in 90 days and you had to wait a while to get well and all this stuff, wait till you're ready to go through the book. There was just some of the old timer sayings, at the time. And I remember saying to my sponsor, I looked at her with despair on my face and I said, do I have to wait 90 days? Because I'm telling you now, if I had to wait any longer than I was already, there's no way I would have stayed sober. I couldn't. I was in that much pain. I was in so much desperation. And she looked at me and she said, no. She said, why wait to get well? She said, come up to me Tuesday and we'll start going through the program. And I suppose my experience was I went through the big book, and I I had a really, really amazing experience. You know, I was up there every single week. I really didn't want to be there some weeks, but I knew I had to. And I started to learn about myself, and I started to uncover some stuff about myself and my resentments and you know, everything, the character defects, everything that comes with it. Um, but I suppose when I finished the 12 steps, you know, my sponsor was very much like she hammered home about continue, 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 continue. Every time. Remember, I closed the page on the book when we were finished, and she said, "No, you're at the start." And I thought, I just went through nearly a year going through the program, and she's telling me I'm at the start. But I understood what she meant, you know, and I started helping other women, but there was something within me. I knew there was more. I knew there was more I wanted to do, and I wanted to go deeper and stuff, you know. And I started looking at a bit of outside help, and I was saying, right, um, okay, I look at this and I start to uncover more. But I was after, and I'll tell you actually how I met Frank, because it's a complete God shot for me anyway. I was at the Nina convention in Tipperary in 2023, I think it was. And there was a big, huge room full of hundreds of people. And I walked in late, and there was one empty seat. And I went up and I went into the seat. And 2 minutes later, someone came up behind me, and I was after robbing Frank's seat. And I had seen him going around, and there was my first ever CA event. And I had seen him going around, and I was thinking to myself, he's like the president of CA, and I'm after taking his seat. Um, but that was our first interaction, you know, and a beautiful relationship had kind of blossomed through that. You know, we met in Portugal, and we started talking about doing something in Cork, and we met again in Scotland, and we sat down again. And but in that, while we had been talking about doing something in Cork and for the fellowship, and something had clicked in me when I heard Frank share about two-way prayer. Um, and something ignited in me, and my ears were open and they pinned, and it was like, what is he talking about? You know, and I heard the word emotional sobriety. It was actually at the Glasgow convention. I think it was September last year, and something had ignited in me, and I was like, it was shouting at me, you know, when something's talking to you that, why I need a bit of this. Um, and I started to listen, and heard him share about it, and I got home, and I contacted Frank straight away the following morning. I said, tell me more about this two-way prayer. I said, I'm the emotional sobriety. And he said, start in the morning. And he introduced me to two-way prayer. And from that day to this day, my life has changed profoundly, you know. I don't know if anyone's familiar with two-way prayer, but to put it simply, it's just you sit and you write to God. You take a bit of time in silence, and then you write back as if God was responding to you. Um, and at the start, it was a bit awkward, and it was a bit, how do I know if it's me, and how do I know what's God saying? And but you know, as the practice got stronger and my connection built, I knew 110% it wasn't me using these words or saying these things, because there was language coming out on the page that I didn't even know the meaning of afterwards, you know, and it was very nurturing, and it was very caring, and it was just absolutely beautiful. And through that, I done that for 30 days. It suggested kind of to do it for 30 days to get into the habit of it. And from that day to this day, I haven't missed a day. And that was over a year ago. So from that, we went into the emotional sobriety workbook. And it was just another layer of my recovery, you know, it was just another layer of going deeper. And I learned so much, you know, I think, so when we would have started that last year, I was coming up on 3 years sober. And I thought, I'm grand. I'm after going through the program. I'm helping women. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. You know, I'm going to counselling. What more can be revealed? Like, you know, and it was. I remember coming off our first session on the emotional sobriety workbook, and it asked you to look at different areas of your life and stuff. And I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? um, you know, just other areas like the gym, the phone, food, you know, my relationships, and it opened a whole new kind of language for me, you know. And I had another beautiful experience going through that, a very uncomfortable experience as well, might I add. And anything that I've done in recovery has not been very pleasant. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's been my experience, you know. Yes, I always have a beautiful experience coming out of it, and I learn a lot, and I have new tools in the bank, and I can go out and share the experience, but it's never really easy. It's uncomfortable, and it's icky, and it forces me to look at myself. But I suppose getting sober to now, I've continued to look at myself, do you know what I mean? I've continued to look at new avenues and how can I improve and basically how can I undo all the shit that I've done over the last 35 years of my life, because there was a lot there. There was absolutely a lot there. Um, but going through the emotional sobriety workbook was just a beautiful, beautiful experience. It showed me new ways of managing my relationships, basically, I suppose I'm a mom of two young girls, I was single parent for a long time. Is like, and that's what I done, you know what I mean? I got into relationships and I'd cause a lot of damage and then I'd convince them they were the problem and I'd leave, you know what I mean? So I was after leaving a bit of a trail of destruction behind me along the way. And such a victim mode, I was convinced that it was done to me, and this bit of work actually, held up the mirror to me, really, you know what I mean? And it made me look a lot deeper at stuff. And um, it goes into three parts, and I don't want to give it away too much because I don't know if anyone knows much about the workbook. But it shows our reactions in situations. Do we move away? Do we move against? Or do we move towards? And it goes into people pleasing and it goes into all these different ways. And my thing all the time is just bolt. I just bolt. I throw the bomb in and then I head on. I just bolt. And it's just been my coping mechanism my whole life. Um, and when I looked at that, it was very, very emotional for me. Do you know what I mean? It was very sad and it was very uncomfortable, as I said, just to realize that I thought that my best solution was just to get away. Do you know what I mean? But like I've been running my whole life. I've been running my whole life, and I found by going through this work that I don't want to run anymore. You know what I mean? I really don't. And I've been able to look at how I manage anything. I have this persona that like, and it's mad because it can still come up. My first thought is, you're not going to mess with me. You think I'm stupid. And that's the way I'm programmed, and whether it be work, whether it be my children, whether it be relationships, my parents, my first thing is I'm not stupid. I'm not, and I come out fighting all the time. But with this bit of work, I think Frank always shares it. It's softened my heart and thickened my skin. So, I don't have to be on the attack and all the time. I don't have to be on the defense all the time. I can actually see people where they're at. I can pause today. I remember Frank saying to me to take a pause, look at someone or visualize someone square in the face, look at them and think, have I ever thought about what they're doing or have ever done what they're doing? And 10 times out of 10, it's a yes, And I try to do that today. Sometimes I don't get the pause at all, and I'm still off the handle. Do you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I suffer with alcoholism and addiction, and show me someone who can master that 24/7 and I'll shake their hands. But yeah, I suppose it's just brought a new level of maturity as a woman as well. You know what I mean? More than anything, I can navigate my kids' emotions. My older daughter there, um, she would have saw a lot of the alcoholism in me and stuff. Do you know what I mean? And I can struggle with my relationship with her, but it's not like that today through this piece of work. Do you know what I mean? It's really not. And I'm in a relationship, my partner's in recovery, and sometimes that can flare up, but more often than not, I can manage it, through this stuff. Um, for me it's a no-brainer. Like I know a lot of people go through the work and then they stop, but like we can't stop with this stuff, as I said at the start. Like, this is life or death. Um, and if anyone's thinking about emotional sobriety or it has come across it, like just give it a go. Just give it a go. You've nothing to lose and everything to gain. Um, I'll be forever grateful for Frank as well for bringing me this piece of work. Do you know what I mean? It's just been absolutely beautiful. And I hope to God that I always have a willingness and a passion for recovery, that I'm able to look at myself, and just pass it on to others. So yeah, I think I'm after going on a bit, so I'm going to leave it to Frank there now. Um, so thanks guys for listening.
We good, Nick? Yeah. Good to go, yeah. Well, let Sinead got all the love hearts first out the way. My name's Frank. I'm an addict. Thank you so much, Sinead, for sharing. Sinead's a cross between my daughter and my wee sister, and I was just looking at the screen. There's lots of people that I've been able to meet on the journey here, and we've had special moments together, and I really cherish what we do here for each other. This is a place where we come and support each other, and there's no other place on earth that I've ever seen like the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous and the people in it. I believe we're just all extraordinary people, and I was at a newcomers meeting in Kent last night, and they'd asked me to share there, and a lot of the theme was that the newcomer was the most important person in the room. And what I believe is that none of us on this platform tonight are more important than anyone. I think we're all equal. I don't think God's got any favourites. I do think he supports the same team as me, right enough. But that one was for Annie Mac. So I was introduced to this emotional sobriety. So it's came off the back of when Bill W was 22 years sober. He was really unwell, with depression, and he wrote a letter in the Grapevine, the next frontier, and he realised like he'd been depressed a long, long time, and he just got a light bulb moment, and he realised that Dr. Bob had never had a day where he went into a dark depression, and he realised that it was his connection with God. That and in his nightmare, it talks about he 12-step 5,000 people in 15 years. So he was always working with other people, but what his connection was with God, of course, there was no big book then at the start, and the guys used the Sermon on the Mount. So at 16 years sober, I hit an emotional bottom. I left my partner at 10 years, who's in recovery. She'll be 17 years clean in a couple of weeks. I ended up homeless. It was COVID, and my dad died. And I went to Glasgow, and the girl who carried this message to me couldn't keep it herself. She ended up using, but she introduced me to this letter, which I was really familiar with. I'm a Dr. Bob guy as well. I study all his stuff. I just was attracted to the way that he lived his life rather than Bill's sobriety. Wouldn't have been, when I read his readings and stuff, I don't think I could have carried on like Bill and stayed sober. So when I get sober, I get 12-stepped with a guy, a Belfast Archie. He was quite renowned in Alcoholics Anonymous, and like Sinead said, in Ireland, there wasn't any meetings in Ireland when I get sober, but CA meetings. And we were very light on the ground in the UK. We only had a few meetings. And Archie took me to my first meeting of Cocaine Anonymous in Chelsea on a Friday night. And the way that he nurtured me and he took me through the process of the 12 steps was just, I just thank God every day for my experience of the way that he took me through the steps. I'd used drugs for 17 years. So I wasn't going to come out of prison, mental hospital, and start telling the truth and start being honest the next day. I was detoxing for Valium, crack, alcohol, morphine. So to get to the truth at that point would have been very, very difficult. And by the experience of men who had walked before me and women that had walked before me, one of the best things Archie ever says to me was, God's no got a stopwatch. You know, because I was very curious when I get sober, and I used to say, how long is it going to take us to get through the steps? And my passion to get through the steps were that I wanted to help other people. And he says, well, we'll get through the steps as quickly as we're going to get through them, or as slowly as we're going to get through them. He said, but one thing that I'm going to assure you, that I'll be here to catch you if you fall. And when I think about that statement today, and I realise how kind and loving that was, he was 40 years sober at that time. My sobriety date is the 21st of June 2004. And my journey has taken all different nooks and crannies and highs and lows and deaths and marriages and births and all the stuff that we experience in recovery. And one thing has remained constant in my recovery, and that is my prayer life. I love prayer. I always have done. But my meditation practices have changed over the years, and Sinead touched on two-way prayer. When I was introduced to two-way prayer, it took me to a different level of consciousness in step 11 with my God. And I've been practicing it for 5 years now. So when I come out of that kind of, it's trauma, there's no doubt about that. You lose your father, you lose a relationship, you lose your house. It's quite traumatic. They say the three hardest things and toughest things in life are losing somebody, breaking up, and moving house. And I done the three of them, you know, and God had a master plan for me, and I just went with it, you know, and I was introduced to this piece of work, you know, and so I'm 16 years sober at this time, and I get presented with this piece of work. I'm 30 days into the two-way prayer at the time to form that habit. They say if we do it for 30 days, you form a habit. And I get hit. This is the first page. I'm just going to read one thing. I'm not a great one when I share, read out the book and all that, but I'm going to read this because obviously the guys had asked me to share an emotional sobriety. So this is the description of emotional sobriety that they've put together. Emotional sobriety is not about being free of emotion. It is about letting go of our need to control, to accept our imperfections, to be emotionally balanced, to take full responsibility for our emotions, to not blame our emotional responses on other people, and to learn to soothe ourselves rather than react when things don't go our way. In short, it's about growing up and maturing. And I read that at 16 years sober, and I nearly fell off the chair. Because at that time, I would have said to you that I was emotionally sober. And the truth of the matter is, I didn't even know what that meant. And as you go through the workbook, it talks about like getting to meetings, having a home group, sponsoring people. For me, where our maximum service was in the prisons, I was doing all that stuff. It talks about it in our beautiful chapter, which is, it talks of just about one step with working with others. There's only a chapter in the book that's dedicated to one step. When all else fails, work with another alcoholic is going to save the day. And my experience of that is I have to be in a right, emotionally balanced position to go and help a sponsee or somebody that's reaching out to help for me. So I don't go looking for newcomers when I'm in trouble emotionally. I go looking for emotionally sober people to get me back on the beam. And then I go looking for newcomers. I think some of us get that wee bit mixed up. You know, and hence why we give so many white keyrings away in CA. It's the most bit of literature we sell. So when I get 12 steps, and actually he wrote in the front of my book, there's many people that know the lyrics, but there's very few that can dance to the tune. And I really understand what that means. And I asked him, I said, what does that really mean? And he says, well, you'll get lots of educated people who'll come into your rooms and can work a rigid programme for the book. They understand scholastically what that means, but they don't understand what language of the heart is. And he says, what we have here as well is he took me to how it works. And he says, there are lots of people that suffer from grave emotional mental disorders. And what he explained to me in that was, he said, there'll be lots of guys with ADHD, there'll be lots of guys with different complexes, as well as alcoholism. And they'll never be able to feel their emotion. He says, but where you're so emotional as a guy, I couldn't stop crying when I get sober. I was ecstatic that I didn't have to get and hurt people and damage people and do things to get ways and means to get more drugs. I was just delighted that I just didn't have to do that anymore. And what was happening to me was, my experience was that he was coming in and taking me to meetings every day to make sure that I got there and to make sure that I was safe. I was homeless when I got sober. I'd just been released from prison and ended up, I was using for 3 days, ended up in a mental hospital, and I got 12 stepped. And he brought me here to you beautiful people. And my experience of walking into that meeting in Chelsea that night, I'd been to 2 other meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous, before, and I love the mothership. Absolutely love it. I love the literature. I love the basic text, Alcoholics Anonymous. But what that done was, it gave me a gateway to get into my spiritual stuff as I walked down the path of recovery. And Bill talks about it. You know, this is the first awakening that we get when we get sober, of many others to come. And he talks about it in his story, if you don't enlarge in a spiritual life. Now, he wrote that in his own story, and yet he didn't enlarge on his spiritual life. And at 22 years sober, he wanted to kill himself. And he wrote this, and this is the founder of the mothership. The founder of your fellowship in Cocaine Anonymous ended up in a very, very similar place and unfortunately died. So for me, getting sober, physically sober, was an absolute joy. And I hear a lot of people coming into the meeting saying when they put the drink and the drugs down, they get worse. That wasn't my experience. My experience was that I was ecstatic that I didn't have to get drunk. I didn't have to use. I didn't have to hurt anybody. So that kind of got me in the door. I was sponsored with amazing people who told me never be homeless in the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous. And for that first meeting to this, 21 and a half years later, I've never been without a home group. So I was accountable straight away to use people. And as the depth from my recovery has deepened and deepened, it's all about love. My whole life revolves around love. There's people who've known me here on this meeting. I've just noticed wee Nikki there. Nikki's known me nearly 20 years. In fact, she's known me my whole recovery at the same time. Natalie's known me since she was a child. Right? And it's like, these people have known me for decades. And I would like to think that I haven't changed much in terms of how I conduct myself with people. I was brought up with a real fantastic upbringing in a real dysfunctional city. I came to London as a kid and ran the gauntlet for years. And I got sober in London. And I thank God for the people that have been put in my path. You know, Sinead spoke about them, how our relationship has grown. And we talk about settings and inches in recovery. And I believe God's just got a big chessboard up there. And when somebody's ready to move into your life, he just moves the two of you and aligns us and the stars together. You know, and that's been my experience in recovery. You know, I've been able to do lots. I've been to quite a few world conventions. I've done all that kind of the external stuff. But what allows me to do that is the internal work that I do on myself on a daily basis. And the way that I look at my recovery, when I come in here in 2004, my spirit was black. It's the only way I can describe it. When I was born as a wee baby, in the faith that I come from, we've got a wee mark on my spirit. And that resembles that we are no perfect. And what happened to me in my experience coming through childhood, adolescence, and into active addiction at the age of 17, I destroyed that spirit. Addiction took every single thing good about me away, one by one. And I was like a pile going into the ground. When you see guys piling into there, that's what it was like for me. And it destroyed lots of people along the way. So I knew that when I came in and surrendered to this simple program, that I had to get men in my corner and women in my corner that were actually not just talking about it, they were actually doing the deal. And I'm not a stupid boy, you know what I mean? I was growing up in a kind of a tough old background, to be honest, know what I mean? But I've always been a soft-hearted kid. I've always kind of, you know, that external, that was that I never knew about fear. And when I was Archie explained what free-floating phobic fear was to me, and then I understood how that I had lived my life. I was more concerned about what you thought about me than what I thought about me. And when you kind of live like that, you're using with people that you don't like. You're using with people that you're scared of. So all of a sudden, my life was a facade until I came into recovery. And then what I started, I remember Archie saying to me one day, he said, "What do you like?" And the only thing I could say was my football team. Because it was just raw emotion. I didn't have any. I couldn't have labelled an emotion. I remember some guy gave me an emotion tree one time, a feelings tree in a meeting. And I just looked at it and I thought, what's that? And like Sinead, I had that one emotion, that anger, and I was rageful. And it was all fear. So when I started to embark on the steps and that fear started to dissipate like an ice cube and I started to melt out, the fog started to lift from my brain. I started to have a real conscious contact with my God. And the only way that I can describe it is the Holy Spirit lit me up like a Christmas tree. And I knew right from wrong all my life. But I was powerless over my addiction. And I was doing things against my will for a long, long time. So I started to work these steps, and when I got to the amends process, I was able to take my dad on a pilgrimage to Medjugorje. I was 5 years sober at the time, and I listened to my father at 78, what it was like for him growing up. And it changed the whole dynamic of our family. And for the first time in my life, I was 39 at the time, my dad was 78, and for the first time in my life, I had lost the selfishness and the self-centeredness. God had taken the cotton wool out my ears. He hadn't stuck it in my mouth. What he'd done was threw it in the bin. And all of a sudden, I started to have relationships that were two-way. I can listen to you, and you listening to me. And all of a sudden, you've got a relationship. I didn't know how that worked. Because I was one of the guys that knew everything. You couldn't tell me much. So all of a sudden I start to bring that consciousness in, and God's running through my veins now. And I can feel the Spirit within me, and I'm lit up. And by the grace of God, I get into a bit of prison work and stuff. I have a dream job here. I'm not going to go into what I do, but it's been a dream. I studied and I got educated in it, and I work with addicts that most of them have done life in prison, and people can't touch them, and God's put me in a position where I can put my arm around them and tell guys and women that I love them, probably for the first time in their lives. Because I don't care what anybody's done. Because my God tells me, if he can forgive me, he can forgive you, no matter what you've done. You know, so when I come in and I start to engage in this stuff at 16 years sober, in the last 5.5 years, I can't tell you what's happened in my life. From the lowest point in my life, and people were saying to me at the time, people close to me, were saying, how come you're still smiling and you've just lost all that? And the reason how I was smiling was I got to walk my mother and my father home to their heavenly Father. And God took them to a better place in paradise. And I was there, sober, conscious. And the last words my wee ma said to me, she hadn't spoke for days, and she just grabbed my hand and she just looked into my eyes and she went like that. Are you behaving yourself? That was the last word she said. And that was a parting shot. So if I was going to use again, it'd be like spitting in my mother's face. It'd be like spitting in God's face if I used again. My Heavenly Father's gave me a privilege of getting sober and carrying this message to people, whoever wants to listen to it. And it's like, I'm no a half glass full guy or a half glass empty man. My glass is overflowing. Because my God wants the best for me. He wants the best for you. And Sinead spoke about that young child there. We've just lost another young boy lost to the disease of addiction today. It's my duty as a recovering addict in this fellowship to reach out to as many people as I can, because that was my amends process. When we got to step 9, Archie says to me, what I want you to do, kid, is go and help as many drug addicts as you can until the day you die. And he died at 78 years of age, 50 years sober. And I was with him 2 nights before it, carrying the message. We would stay in London and he was in Burnley. And I went with him. I was the youngest sponsee, so I used to get the road trips with him. And what I learned with that guy, you know, he gets sober in Belfast in 1963, the 24th of September. A guy called Chuck Chamberlain came over and carried the message, and he was his mentor for then. He took Archie through the steps. Archie showed me how to go through the steps the way that Chuck showed him. And I've been blessed to pat a few people along the way, you know, and I don't put myself in any bracket like Chuck Chamberlain or Archie Campbell. I'm just Celtic Frank that was a wee junkie that get cleaned up. He cleaned his soul up, and he tries to help others clean their soul up. You know, I've never come away from the basics of this programme, although I've engaged in lots and lots of other outside work, outside activities. But for me, I think the best and most powerful thing that one of us can give to another is that kind act of love. And it could come in the form of a smile, a handshake, a hug. This is all about love, man. That's what it's all about. And if I'm no loving and I'm no serving, I'm no working a 12-step programme. So everything that I do in my life today, I ask myself 4 questions before I go into any situation. Is it honest? Is it pure? Is it unselfish? Or is it loving? The four absolutes. And if I can answer that question, I'm going to run with it. And if you kind of work and live your life like that, the results that we get here are incredible. The results that I've been able to achieve in the last 21 and a half years, it would blow my mind. And I'll just finish with this. We went into Archie's wee sitting room the first day that I went up when I asked him to sponsor me, and I was invited round to his home. And he had a blank canvas on the wall. And he says, when you take my hand and walk up these 12 golden steps with me, he says, this blank canvas would blind you before you're halfway through if you're going to see what's going to happen to you in the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous. So my experience is emotionally sober, as Sinead said, every day. Catch me down the Lacoste shop and fucking the weekend. Probably no emotionally sober, right? Especially if there's a sale on, right? But that's where it nips me. It nips me in the shopping. My recovery's been like whack-a-mole. I put one down and something else pops up. But what my experience has been here is the beauty that you've gave me and the 12-step that you've carried to me. I just hope and pray that I've carried that back to somebody else tonight. And when I walk in a room of Cocaine Anonymous, when I walk in a jail, when I walk in anywhere that I'm going to be, what I try and do is just bring a bit of love into the room. Because that human touch, you never know who you're going to help. So the way I live my life today, and since I've been working this emotional sobriety for the last 5 years, I used to worry about what people thought and stuff like that. I don't think like that anymore. Nobody's got the power to make me feel anything. My God's put me in a position to be neutral with that. And the beauty is when you live your life like that, it doesn't matter if anybody in this forum doesn't like me the night. It's none of my business. Because I love every single one of yous, and you can't do a thing about it. And when I live like that, my world's a lot easier and a lot safer and it's a beautiful world out there. So if there's anybody new, anybody struggling, anybody been here a while and maybe wants to try something different, I'll put my number in the chat if anybody wants to get in contact with me. And then I'll pass your number on to Sinead. I won't. But yeah, I'll put my number in the chat and we can have a wee chat if I can enhance your life or your family's life or anybody else's. So thank you, Nick, for asking me to speak. Thanks, Joey. I love you both. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Frank. Appreciate it. Thank you. That was an amazing share. I'm just coming down from some food poisoning yesterday, so I'll try my best to do a proper share back. But I've written some things down, and Sinead, thank you too. Absolutely loved the way you started as well, stressing that there's people actually dying in and outside the rooms, and actually the Irish have a special place in my heart for they did start a fire in my recovery. I've been to Belfast 2 years ago to Unity Day, and I've met a type of recovery that was much more raw. And we heard very good shares, but in the Netherlands, we got a pretty good care system, so you can jump into a detox for free. But I learned that in the UK, it's not free. You got to pay, you got to have rich parents or whatever to get into a detox. So as a result, you guys have much more addicted people on the streets, people who are going down the drain much faster. And I remember standing outside that church building. We had the Unity Day, and literally, no kidding, there was needles on the floor there from the last night, and people actually using around the church. And I was a shooter, but I was so fortunate to be able to jump into a detox. But yeah, God forbid if I've been born in Ireland, you know. So thank you for that, for sharing about that. And I think Frank, you shared about Johnny Siegel, founder of CA. Actually, I was talking about Johnny Siegel with the woman named Veronica Klein. She was the one who started the first CA meeting ever. She was the first chair to say the words, "Welcome to the first ever Cocaine Anonymous meeting." And I think it was somewhere in Hollywood. And she was actually one of the people who found Johnny Siegel on the floor. You know, so even the founder of our program, he died of this disease. So there's no guarantees in this thing. And there's so many things on the streets now that you can't imagine. Like, we used to only be crack, coke, and heroin, but now we got fentanyl, we got crystal meth, we got stuff like flakka. They will take you out fast, and I'm always grateful that I never really encountered those, because I would have done it if I've encountered it, you know. So I'm very grateful I did not. So yeah, many good things I took from your share. I took some notes. I really appreciate you guys for coming on tonight. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to our speaker selector, which is Debbie.
Sorry, Nick, just quickly, the recording's still on.